Hello, my name is Lily. My sister called me Lowly, then banned me from every family party like I was some kind of embarrassment she needed to erase. But the truth cuts deeper than that. She didn't just push me out of rooms. She quietly rewrote my place in our family, stole my ideas, poisoned my friendships, made sure I looked like the broken one while she wore the crown. I thought I was just imagining it. I thought maybe, if I tried harder, she would love me. But how do you fight back against a betrayal that's been hiding in plain sight your whole life? And when you finally see it, how do you survive it? The sun scorched down mercilessly on Nashville that afternoon, turning the asphalt into a shimmering black river and bouncing off the polished, gleaming cars lined up outside my parents' sprawling house. The Harpers had always known how to put on a show, and today was no exception. A casual backyard party to celebrate Jolie's hitting 1 million followers, but with rented valet staff, live music, and enough champagne to float a yacht. It was supposed to be a family celebration, but for me, it felt like standing at the velvet rope outside a club where everyone else had the password and I was the punchline. I clutched my simple beige clutch tighter, feeling the stiff faux leather bite into my palm. With my other hand, I smoothed out invisible creases on my modest navy blue dress. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't expensive, but it was neat, respectable. I had debated for hours over it that morning, wondering if I should have bought something trendier, something louder, something that screamed, I belong here too. But no dress in the world could change the fact that, in Jolie's glittering, curated life, I was a blurry, unwanted extra in the background. I took a breath, steadying myself, and stepped onto the manicured stone pathway that led to the front entrance. The air buzzed with energy, men in crisp linen shirts and designer sunglasses, women whose laughter tinkled like glass wind chimes, waiters in black vests balancing champagne flutes on silver trays. Every inch of the front yard, from the artful flower arrangements to the perfectly positioned string lights, screamed money, taste, and exclusivity. As I approached the entrance, a tall security guard in a tailored black suit stood behind a glossy podium, checking names against a sleek clipboard. His mirrored sunglasses reflected back a distorted version of Mesmal, plain, forgettable. Hi, I said, forcing my voice to be even, cheerful. Lily Harper. He scanned the list, flipped a page, checked again. A slight frown creased his forehead before he looked up, his expression shifting into something carefully apologetic. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the list. For a second, everything around me, the clinking glasses, the chirping birds, the low thrum of conversation blurred into a muffled haze. I blinked, feeling heat rush to my face. There must be a mistake, I said, my laugh brittle. I'm Jolie's sister. He shook his head with mechanical sympathy. I'm sorry. If you're not on the list, I can't let you in. Behind me, a murmur began to ripple through the crowd. I caught a few snickers, the unmistakable pop of a phone camera capturing the moment. A hot, sick feeling bloomed in my stomach. Before I could protest further, the crowd parted like the Red Sea, and there she was, Jolie, floating towards us in a shimmering silver dress that probably cost more than my entire monthly rent. Her blonde hair was swept up into a loose, effortless bun. Her makeup looked airbrushed to perfection. She was radiant, untouchable, every bit the golden girl Nashville had fallen in love with. And she was smirking. Well, well, she drawled loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, her southern lilt sweet and sharp as a knife. If it isn't little Miss Lowly. The words slapped me harder than any physical blow. The collective intake of breath around us was almost theatrical. I saw faces turn, phones lift subtly. I was giving them a show, and they were eating it up. She thinks just showing up means she belongs here, Jolie continued with a sing-song cruelty, linking her arm through the security guards with mock affection. Bless her heart. 3 small words, dripping with syrupy disdain. In the South, it was the polite way to say you were pitiful, irredeemable, pathetic. I could have crumbled, could have begged, defended myself, caused a scene. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not anymore. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and smiled, not a big fake grin, but something small and steel-hard. It's all right, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor building inside me. It's your day, Jolie. Enjoy it. No fireworks, No tears, just those words, plain and unshakable. I turned on my heel and walked away, my flats tapping steadily against the stone path. With every step I took, the party noise, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the pop songs drifting from the backyard speakers, faded into a low, meaningless hum behind me. My heart hammered against my ribs, my palms were slick with sweat, but my mind had never felt sharper. This wasn't some misunderstanding, I realized, as I crossed the sidewalk to where I'd parked 2 blocks away to avoid the valet stand. This wasn't an oversight or a mistake. Jolie hadn't forgotten to add my name to the list. She had deliberately kept me out. This was a message, loud and clear. As I reached my car, the sun was dipping low, casting long, cool shadows across the pavement. I stood there for a moment, clutching my keys, breathing in the heavy, humid air. Something shifted inside me then. It wasn't anger exactly, though there was anger there, simmering low and deep. It wasn't sadness, though grief twined around my ribs, squeezing tight. It was something different, something clean, a resolve so pure it almost frightened me. This would be the last time Yoli or anyone else made me feel small, invisible, lesser. Not one more time. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. I wasn't going to dim myself to fit into someone else's shallow world. I slipped into my car, pulled the door shut, and sat for a moment, the engine silent, the key cold in my hand. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, I started the ignition. The engine roared to life, low and sure, just like the new rhythm beating inside my chest. I drove away without looking back. That night, sleep never found me. I tossed under the thin sheet, the Tennessee summer heat clinging to my skin as tightly as the shame from earlier clung to my heart. Hours blurred into one another until it was just me, my phone screen glowing in the darkness, and memories I had spent years trying to forget surfacing with cruel clarity. I scrolled through old photos, birthday parties, graduations, holidays, every image a carefully staged portrait of family bliss. But looking closer now, I noticed things I'd missed before. Jolie's tight smiles. Her eyes that never seemed to soften when looking at me. Subtle things, but undeniable. The next morning bled into the next day without much distinction. Coffee tasted like cardboard, and the walls of my apartment felt smaller, more suffocating. My inbox remained untouched, my mind too busy replaying every word Jolie had flung at me with that saccharine smile. By the second day, Serafina called. "Meet me at Grady's," she said simply, the urgency in her voice slicing through my days. Grady's was our usual, a small, tucked-away cafe that smelled like burnt caramel and warm bread, a place where the noise of the world dimmed just enough for truth to breathe. I slid into the booth across from her, noting how she fidgeted with her coffee sleeve. She was nervous, and Serafina was never nervous. She didn't waste time. "Lily," she said, voice low, "you need to know, Jolie's been running her mouth about you for years." My breath caught. "What are you talking about?" She looked around the cafe before leaning closer. "She's been planting stories, telling people you're unstable, unreliable, that you're basically a ticking time bomb." I blinked, the words slamming into me harder than Jolie's public humiliation ever could. Serafina's hands tightened around her cup. "She made you the scapegoat, Lily. Every time something went wrong, a missed deadline, a bad campaign, she hinted you were the weak link. And people believed her because, well, she said it with that sweet little bless-her-heart charm. There it was again. That weaponized southern sweetness Jolie wielded better than any sword. "And you're telling me this now?" I asked, my voice a little harsher than intended. Serafina's face crumpled in guilt. "I should have told you sooner. I didn't know how deep it went until recently." I sat back, heart pounding. Years. This wasn't some random betrayal. It was strategic, systematic, and the worst part, I hadn't even seen it happening. After a heavy silence, Serafina pushed her phone across the table. "Look at this." On the screen was a screenshot, an email chain between Jolie and a major marketing firm. Attached were social media proposals, ideas, strategies, concepts, all in my writing, all bearing my style. Only the name credited, Jolie. I stared, my throat closing. She stole my work. She stole my ideas and paraded them as her own to climb higher, to get richer, to build the perfect facade while pushing me further into the background. A bitter laugh escaped me. Of course she did. Serafina looked ready to cry. I'm so sorry, Lily. But I wasn't looking for sympathy. Not anymore. I slid the phone back across the table. Thank you for showing me. Because now I knew. Now it was no longer just petty insults or cruel party games. It was calculated. It was theft. It was war. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on my bed, my laptop open but forgotten. The document I was supposed to be working on blinked blankly at me. Instead, I grabbed my journal, a leather-bound thing that had seen better days, and wrote one sentence across a fresh page. This ends now. I underlined it twice, pressing the pen so hard that it tore slightly into the paper. As I closed the journal, a strange calmness settled over me. Not the kind born of resignation, but the kind that comes when you finally understand the enemy you're dealing with. For the first time in years, I realized something essential. Forgiveness wasn't strength. It was fear wearing a halo, and I was done being afraid. The next few days crept by in a haze of muted rage. It wasn't the kind that demanded a screaming match or impulsive retaliation. It was the slow, boiling kind, the kind that hardened resolve like fire-tempered steel. By the time Sunday rolled around, I felt like a live wire humming beneath the surface. That morning, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Family brunch, no excuses, starts at 11, bring a smile, bring a smile. As if a forced curve of the lips could patch over years of cracks. I almost didn't go. A big part of me wanted to delete the message and spend the day hiding under a blanket with a pint of cookie dough ice cream. But then I thought about Jolie's face at the party, the triumph in her eyes when she saw me turned away at the door. No, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Not today. The Harper family home stood just as imposing as it had during the party, a gleaming testament to appearances and hollow victories. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the ignition, and took a long breath before stepping out into the heavy summer air. Inside, the familiar scent of lemon polish and cinnamon rolls wrapped around me, deceptively warm. The dining room buzzed with the clatter of silverware and hollow laughter. Jolie was already holding court at the head of the table, a queen in her perfect white dress, sipping mimosas like she ruled the world. Well, look who decided to join us, she chirped as I walked in, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few heads turned, a few polite smiles flickered and died. I ignored her and slid into a seat at the far end of the table. I busied myself with unfolding my napkin, pretending not to notice the glances darting my way like arrows. The meal was a minefield of small talk and thinly veiled jabs. I kept my head down, answering when addressed, forcing myself to swallow both the food and the rising bile. And then it happened. As the plates were being cleared and conversation lulled, Jolie leaned back in her chair, swirling her champagne lazily. You know, she said with a bright smile, it's just amazing how far social media has come. I mean, even assistants these days get to call themselves strategists. Isn't that something? Laughter rippled around the table, soft, uncertain, but real. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. The blood roared in my ears, but I kept my expression neutral. I wouldn't give her a show. Not here. Not yet. The brunch wrapped up with hugs and promises to get together more often, the kind everyone knew were lies the moment they were uttered. As I was pulling my keys from my purse, Serafina caught up to me outside. You got a minute? She asked, her voice low. We walked to the side of the house out of earshot. I wasn't going to say anything, she began, fidgeting with her necklace, but you deserve to know. I stiffened. Know what? She exhaled sharply. A while back, Jolie told some friends and I overheard it that you were her Plan B. I stared at her. Plan B? I repeated slowly, the words tasting like ash. Yeah, she said you were useful when needed, that if anything ever happened to her accounts or her deals, she'd just borrow your stuff until she got back on top. The world tilted for a second. It wasn't just casual cruelty anymore. It was calculated. It was survival hers, at the cost of my dignity. I swallowed hard. Thanks for telling me, I said, my voice cold and flat. Serafina reached out like she wanted to say more, but I shook my head and turned away. Some things didn't need more words. Driving home, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles bleached white. I pulled into my driveway and sat there, staring out at nothing, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. Inside my chest, something had snapped clean. No more pretending, no more hoping, no more giving people the benefit of the doubt when they showed me exactly who they were. They wanted war? Fine, I wouldn't start it, but I damn sure would finish it. The anger didn't fade. It sharpened into something quieter, heavier, a blade honed in the dark. I spent the next 2 weeks not screaming, not crying, but working. Every late night when the world was asleep, I sat at my dining table, laptop open, my fingers dancing over the keys with ruthless precision. One by one, I dismantled everything I had ever done to help Jolie deleted old posts where I'd quietly boosted her image, canceled auto-renewed marketing services she didn't even know I had set up for her, removed backlinks, shut down dummy accounts that had been used to amplify her brand. Each click was a small act of silent retaliation. Each deletion, a reclaiming of space she never deserved. She wouldn't notice right away, no. That wasn't how this worked. Like termites hollowing a house from the inside out, my absence would take time to show its damage. But it would come. The strange part was how calm I felt. No rush of triumph, no giddy satisfaction, just cold resolve. I wasn't out for revenge. I was taking back what was mine, my time, my energy, my name. 2 weeks later, I found myself at the Riverside Convention Center. The Chamber of Commerce was hosting a local business expo, nothing glamorous. But in Nashville's close-knit entrepreneurial circles, it mattered. I hadn't planned to attend until I heard Jolie would be one of the keynote speakers, invited to talk about her branding journey. I couldn't resist. I didn't want to sabotage her, not overtly, but I wanted to see it. See what she looked like without my silent scaffolding. I arrived early, badge clipped to my jacket, blending in among the modest crowd. Small businesses, handmade soaps, consulting firms, the heartbeat of real people working real dreams. I wandered the booths, sipping weak coffee and pretending not to be on edge. As I approached the registration table for the keynote session, I gave my name to the attendant. She smiled brightly, typed into her tablet, then frowned. "I'm sorry," she said, looking up. "I don't see your name on the list." My stomach dropped. "There must be a mistake. I registered weeks ago." She double-checked, shook her head. "I'm really sorry." I stood there stunned, the low murmur of the crowd swallowing me. Then I caught a flicker of movement near the entrance. Jolie, standing with her manager, glancing my way for just a split second before turning back, a smirk playing on her lips. Of course, it was subtle, petty, exactly her style. I forced a smile at the attendant, thanked her anyway, and walked outside into the blinding sun. Standing on the sidewalk, watching the buzz of the event happening without me, it clicked. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. Jolie wasn't playing a twisted version of sibling rivalry. She was systematically trying to erase me. Every exclusion, every snide comment, every little sabotage, it was warfare, fought in the shadows of social grace. I leaned against a lamppost, letting the late afternoon heat seep into my bones. Around me, Nashville pulsed on, uncaring. For a long moment, I watched the river glint under the fading sun and let myself feel the weight of it all. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a simple text to Serafina. No more backing down. I tucked my phone back into my purse and straightened up. If Jolie wanted to make me invisible, she'd have to work a hell of a lot harder. Because the next time she tried to crush me, I would be ready to hit back. The days that followed felt strangely calm, like the eerie stillness before a tornado rips through a town. I went back to my routine's work, gym, coffee with Serafina, but every move I made now carried a sharpened edge. I wasn't operating from hurt anymore. I was operating from strategy. One afternoon, Serafina and I sat cross-legged on my worn-out couch, the soft hum of the air conditioner struggling against the Tennessee heat. I mapped out everything: how to protect my reputation, how to rebuild my brand independently, how to move in circles Jolie couldn't contaminate. Serafina listened, nodding, tossing in advice where needed. For once, I felt like I had a battle plan, one that didn't require shouting matches or passive-aggressive family dinners. Just quiet, deliberate moves. But Jolie must have sensed the shift, even without seeing it directly, because she struck first. It started innocently enough. A few cryptic posts popped up on her Instagram stories, vague references to jealousy among family and how sad it is when someone you love wants to see you fail. Typical vague booking nonsense, but the message was clear enough for anyone who knew the situation. At first, I rolled my eyes and brushed it off. Let her talk, I thought. People see through that eventually. But then it escalated. Jolie posted a photo of us as kids, arms slung around each other, big grins captioned, "Some people outgrow their love for you when they realize they can't outshine you." The comments section exploded. Friends, family, acquaintances. They all chimed in, some subtle, some not, hinting that maybe I was the bitter one, the jealous little sister who couldn't handle another's success. Private messages trickled into my inbox too. "Are you okay?" Jolie seemed really hurt. "It's such a shame. Family should lift each other up, not tear each other down." Each message landed like a slap. It didn't matter that none of them knew the real story. Jolie had done what she always did best, controlled the narrative before I even opened my mouth. I sat at my kitchen table one night, staring at my phone in disbelief as another mutual friend posted a thinly veiled dig. True colors come out when the spotlight isn't on you. It was like watching a slow-moving train wreck where you were the one tied to the tracks. Serafina, ever the voice of reason, told me to stay calm. "They'll see the truth eventually," she said, pouring me another glass of wine. But I wasn't feeling patient anymore. I wasn't feeling passive. They could whisper behind screens all they wanted. I wasn't going to sit by and let them paint me into their villain. Late that night, I posted a single story on my private account, one that only close friends could see. No names, no accusations, just this. When lies stack high enough, they collapse under their own weight. No hashtags, no callouts, no drama. But I knew the people who needed to see it would, and judging by the sudden flurry of unfollows from a few so-called friends, I hit exactly where it hurt. It wasn't about dragging Jolie into the mud. It wasn't about public vengeance. It was about setting a line in the sand. If they wanted to believe her lies, that was their choice. I wasn't wasting another second trying to correct them. I was done explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. The next morning, I woke up to a different kind of silence, the heavy, suffocating kind that fills a room after the last punch has been thrown. My phone buzzed with one last text from someone I once considered a close friend. "I just can't be part of this drama anymore. I hope you find peace." I smiled grimly, tossed the phone onto the couch, and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. Peace? They thought cutting me off was a punishment. They didn't realize they were doing me a favor. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled my tiny kitchen, but I barely noticed as I scrolled through my phone, the headlines blaring back at me. Jolie Harper opens up about family betrayal. The article was littered with words like heartbreak, loyalty, and healing. Pictures of her looking tearful, perfectly posed, perfectly lit, adorned the page. She was playing the victim like she was born for the role. I set the phone down carefully, almost reverently, like it might burn my skin. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't remorseful. She was manipulating the narrative, again. Only this time, I wasn't the naive little sister hoping she'd come around. I was done waiting for miracles. Later that afternoon, Serafina met me at our usual coffee spot, a cozy, slightly run-down place tucked between a used bookstore and a yoga studio. She slid into the booth across from me, a laptop under one arm and a grim look on her face. "Ready to see the real show?" she asked, already pulling up her screen. I nodded, my stomach coiled tight with anticipation. Serafina clicked through screenshots, videos, and private voice messages Jolie had left on group chats, mocking me, plotting posts, staging her little redemption arc, all while pretending online that she was the wounded party. "Here's the best part," Serafina said, smirking grimly. She played a short clip, Jolie's voice unmistakably sneering, saying, "Give it a month. They'll forget she even exists. People are stupid like that." My chest tightened, a mixture of anger and cold-cutting clarity. It was all an act. Every teardrop, every heartfelt caption, every fake apology. By the end of the slideshow, my hands were steady, my heart pounding with a rhythm that no longer sounded like fear, it sounded like purpose. "Send it," I said simply. Serafina grinned. "Already did. Anonymous dropped to 3 major gossip blogs. Should hit by morning." We clinked our coffee mugs together, a quiet, deadly toast. The reckoning had officially begun. The next few days passed in a blur of righteous vindication. Screenshots circulated. Jolie's curated victim persona cracked under public scrutiny. People began piecing the truth together that the Golden Girl wasn't as pure as she liked to pretend. It wasn't just petty revenge. It was exposure. It was survival. But Serafina and I both knew Jolie wouldn't go down without a fight. "You need to prepare for her next move," Serafina warned one evening as we sat in my apartment, the city lights casting broken reflections across my living room floor. "She's going to get desperate." That's when she handed me a card, sleek, minimalistic. Laura Mitchell, attorney at law defamation and cyberbullying defense specialist. "She works pro bono for cases like yours," Serafina said. "She's good, real good. If Jolie tries anything legally shady, you'll be ready." I stared at the card, a foreign feeling blooming in my chest. Security. Not hope, not blind trust, something stronger. Preparation. I scheduled a meeting with Laura for the next afternoon. We talked through everything: the smear campaign, the stolen ideas, the public humiliation. Laura listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes with swift, efficient movements. By the time I left her office, clutching a folder of preliminary legal strategies, I felt taller, heavier, armored. Jolie had played her games in the shadows for years, knowing I had no defenses. Now I had a shield and a sword. That night, I sat on my bed, legs tucked beneath me, phone in hand. I thought about posting some grand declaration, some cathartic explosion of truth. But then I remembered, the strongest moves are often the quietest. I opened my private social media account, the one only trusted friends still followed, and posted one line, stark against a black background. "This isn't a fight, it's a reckoning." I didn't check the reactions. I didn't need to. I knew Jolie would see it. I knew she would understand exactly what it meant. The next morning, I woke up not to dread or fear, but to an almost electric stillness, like the charged air before a thunderstorm. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't scared. Jolie had made her move. Now it was my turn. I had thought the storm had passed. Turns out Jolie was just gathering her next wave. It started small, an ugly comment on an old post, a subtle dig buried in a thread I hadn't checked in weeks. At first I brushed it off. Trolls were nothing new on the internet. But by the end of the week, it wasn't just trolls. It was an avalanche. Dozens, then hundreds of fake accounts cropped up overnight. My inbox flooded with cruel messages, twisting every truth about me into something ugly. Accusations I'd never heard before echoed across platforms. Words like jealous, toxic, unstable clung to my name like smoke. I refreshed my screen, my heart hammering faster with every notification. Photos of me, poorly photoshopped into compromising situations. Quotes taken wildly out of context. DMs from strangers telling me I was disgusting or a disgrace to my family. Sitting in my living room, the Nashville evening light fading into shadow around me, I realized this wasn't random. This was organized. Jolie wasn't just fighting back, she was trying to obliterate me. Serafina came over the next morning, her laptop under her arm and a steely look in her eye. She wasted no time, sliding into my kitchen chair and flipping her computer open. "She hired them," Serafina said grimly. "Bot farms. Paid trolls. I traced some of the account creation patterns. It's textbook." I squeezed my coffee mug so tightly it creaked. "How do we prove it?" Serafina smiled, a sharp, dangerous curve of her mouth. "We don't have to. She's already sloppy." Over the next 2 days, Serafina dug deep. Screenshots piled up. IP addresses overlapped. Fake followers appeared by the thousands on Jolie's accounts. Too many, too fast, too obvious. The final blow came when a whistleblower, a freelance PR agent Jolie had stiffed on a payment, leaked emails to a local blog. Emails where Jolie discussed buying a few thousand fans to offset the negative press. It went viral within hours. The golden image she had crafted so carefully started to crack at the seams. Big lifestyle influencers unfollowed her. Brands quietly pulled collaborations. Even the local papers began running pieces with thinly veiled skepticism. When authenticity backfires, the perils of manufactured fame. Still, it wasn't enough. Not for me. Because in the middle of that chaotic week, another blow struck, but this one, Jolie didn't see coming. An old video resurfaced. Grainy footage taken at an event 3 years prior. Jolie screaming at a teenage volunteer who had spilled coffee on her shoes. The words were vicious, cruel, and entirely unprovoked. "You can't even carry a tray, right? God, no wonder you'll never be anything." The video spread like wildfire. Overnight, the narrative shifted. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the villain. I watched it unfold from my couch, legs tucked under me, a heavy blanket wrapped around my shoulders, even though the summer air was warm. The comments turned brutal, but not toward me, toward her. How could anyone treat a kid like that? Fake apologies mean nothing when this is the real you. Unfollowed, disgusted. It was a strange feeling, watching her house of lies burn down, not with a bang, but with a slow, relentless collapse. Part of me thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. I hadn't lifted a single match. Jolie had set herself ablaze. All I had done was hold up the mirror. Later that evening, Serafina and I sat at our usual caf, a quiet satisfaction buzzing between us. "You played it perfectly," she said, tapping her spoon against her coffee cup. She destroyed herself. I stared out the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. "Maybe," I said softly, "but it's not over yet. Because people like Jolie, they didn't vanish quietly. They clawed, they schemed. They found ways to rebrand their sins into sob stories if you gave them even half a chance. And I wasn't about to give her one. The fallout wasn't just messy, it was a landslide. By the time Monday morning rolled around, it seemed like the entire city of Nashville had a front row seat to Jolie's downfall. Headlines splashed across digital news feeds. Top influencer caught faking numbers. Toxic behavior exposed, former darling under fire. Brand deals terminated amid scandal. Emails flooded Jolie's inbox, not the flattering kind. First, it was the skincare brand that had once flown her to Miami for a glamorous launch party. Then, a fitness apparel company pulled out, citing a misalignment of core values. One by one, the dominoes fell. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching the pristine empire Jolie built collapse under its own lies was satisfaction enough. Sitting in my kitchen, a chipped coffee mug cradled between my palms, I scrolled through the headlines. Serafina perched on a stool nearby, tapping her nails against her phone, feeding me updates in real time. "She's hemorrhaging followers," she said, glancing up. "Big time." I nodded but didn't smile. It didn't feel like winning a prize. It felt like pulling myself out of quicksand. A new email pinged into my inbox. I glanced at it, expecting another news alert, but my breath caught. It was an invitation. A well-known podcast. One that specialized in real, raw conversations about toxic family dynamics had reached out. They wanted me. They wanted to hear my side. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't about taking cheap shots at Jolie. This was about truth, about giving voice to years of silence. Still, the thought of speaking publicly twisted my stomach into knots. Would they believe me? Would they think I was just another bitter sibling airing dirty laundry? I closed the laptop softly and leaned back in my chair, the ceiling fan humming above me. "I think you should do it," Serafina said, reading my silence like a book. "Not for revenge, for closure." I met her gaze and saw no judgment there, only quiet encouragement. The next day, I found myself sitting in a cozy recording studio, headphones resting lightly over my ears. The host, a woman named Mariah with kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice, smiled reassuringly from across the table. "When you're ready," she said, gesturing to the mic. I took a deep breath, and I spoke. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. I just told the truth, my truth, about growing up in the shadow of someone who measured love by usefulness, about being gaslit into doubting my worth, about learning that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty, it was survival. By the time the interview ended, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, because I'd let go. Later that night, as I sat on my balcony sipping sweet tea under the early autumn stars, my phone buzzed with a string of new messages. Not the usual bile or pity. These were different. Old friends, former co-workers, names I hadn't seen pop up in years. "Hey, I'm sorry for not believing you back then. I have something you might want to see." I should have spoken up sooner. One by one, they came forward. Screenshots, text chains, voice memos, all documenting Jolie's long pattern of manipulation lies whispered behind my back. Sabotaged opportunities, cruel jokes made at my expense. Proof. Not that I needed it anymore to validate what I had lived through, but seeing it laid bare was its own kind of justice. I sat there, the cool breeze brushing against my skin, scrolling through years of betrayal now dragged into the light. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even feel particularly triumphant. I just felt free. It wasn't about destroying Jolie anymore. She had done that to herself. It was about finally refusing to carry the weight of her sins on my shoulders. I set my phone down on the table, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence stretch between the stars. For the first time in my adult life, it wasn't poisoned by regret or self-doubt. I hadn't burned bridges. I had simply stopped crossing them. Walking through the front doors of the podcast studio, I felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation settle over me. Peace. Not the brittle, defensive kind I used to armor myself with whenever Jolie's name came up, but something steadier, deeper, like finally stepping out of a storm and realizing the ground beneath you is still solid. The studio itself was unremarkable, just a few chairs, a table, some recording equipment, and a soft buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. But as I sat down, adjusted the microphone, and took a sip of water, it felt monumental. This wasn't about dragging Jolie through the mud. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my story, the one she had tried so hard to erase. Across from me, the podcast host, Mariah, smiled warmly. She had the kind of presence that made you feel like you could say anything, and it would be met with understanding, not judgment. "When you're ready, Lily," she said gently. I closed my eyes for half a second, drawing a steady breath into my lungs. Then I leaned forward and spoke. I didn't start with the betrayals or the screaming matches or the public humiliations. I started with the loneliness, the quiet ways a toxic family dynamic convinces you that you're the problem, that love is something you earn by being useful, obedient, small. I spoke about the years I spent minimizing myself, trying to fit into a shrinking space Jolie left for me. I shared the nights I cried in silence, the mornings I woke up determined to try harder, be better, only to be pushed aside again. I spoke about the breaking point, the party, the betrayal, the war I never asked for but refused to lose. Mariah didn't interrupt. She just nodded occasionally, her eyes encouraging me to continue, to dig deeper. By the time the recording ended, my throat was raw, but my heart felt light. Like I had been carrying a backpack full of stones for years without even realizing it, and now, finally, I could set it down. The next few days passed in a surreal blur. The episode aired on a Thursday morning. I didn't promote it. I didn't share it on my public platforms. I didn't even tell most of my friends. But somehow it found its way into the world. Messages began pouring in. Emails, DMs, letters, from strangers, from women who had been scapegoated by their families, from men who had been gaslighted into silence, from people who didn't have the words for their own pain until they heard mine. "Thank you for telling the story I was too afraid to tell. You made me feel less alone. Because of you, I'm setting boundaries for the first time in my life." Reading those messages was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't fame, it wasn't vanity, it was connection. Real, raw, human connection. Some local news outlets picked up the story. A few blogs ran think pieces about the podcast episode. There was even tentative talk about a panel discussion for National Mental Health Awareness Month. I hadn't set out to become anyone's symbol. But maybe that's how real healing works, not by climbing up on a pedestal, but by reaching down into the mud and helping someone else climb out too. Late one evening, after a long day responding to emails and sipping lukewarm coffee, I found myself sitting alone on my back porch. The night was crisp, the first real bite of fall nipping at the air. I pulled a blanket tighter around my shoulders and stared up at the stars. Those same stars that had once felt like silent witnesses to my suffering now felt like promises. Of what? I wasn't sure yet. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. Jolie was still out there somewhere, probably plotting a comeback, spinning her narrative, gathering whatever scraps of sympathy she could find. But she wasn't my problem anymore. She wasn't my shadow. She wasn't my burden. The scars she left behind, they remained. They always would. But they didn't ache the way they used to. They weren't open wounds anymore. They were reminders of battles fought and survived. Freedom, I realized, wasn't about pretending the fire never happened. It was about forging something stronger from its ashes. And I had. Not just survival, not just resilience, but power, quiet, steady, unshakable power. I smiled, a real one this time, and whispered into the night, "You don't own my story anymore." Maybe Jolie never would understand. Maybe the world wouldn't always get it either. But I did. And that was enough. Freedom isn't about forgetting what they did. It's about living in a world where they can no longer touch you. After everything I've lived through, one truth stands clear. Freedom isn't given, it's claimed, often at a cost. It took me years to learn that forgiveness doesn't mean staying silent while someone keeps hurting you. Keeping the peace at your own expense isn't noble, it's self-destruction. Walking away from toxic family isn't betrayal. It's survival. I spent too long shrinking myself, believing if I was quieter or easier to love, maybe they'd finally see my worth. But the hard truth? You don't earn your humanity, you were born deserving respect. No matter how loud the liars scream, or how many leave when you set boundaries, it doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're getting stronger. If you feel trapped by a family that treats you as disposable, hear this. You are not crazy, you are not broken, and you are not alone. You have the right to your voice, to peace, to a life that doesn't ask you to bleed to belong. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop crossing bridges that only ever led you to harm. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because they couldn't love you back in a healthy way? What did it teach you about your strength? Drop a 1 inch in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. If you're fighting your own battle, your voice matters, let's talk. If you found a sliver of hope here, subscribe. We're building a space where real stories matter, where no one heals alone. Healing is messy, painful, and real, but it's worth it. Thanks for being here. You matter, always.